Jue, great to see you again, and thank you for joining my podcast. Why won't they do what I tell them to do? I want to get to know you a little bit first, Jue, and to do that, I want to ask a little bit about your background. So I believe you grew up in Singapore, and maybe you can tell us kind of your start there and your plan to, come to America, come to the Big Apple, when that all happened. So maybe tell us a little bit about yourself and your background.
Yes, I am from Singapore. As most people know, Singapore is a full stop on the global map. And when I was younger, I used to tell my mother, that someday I will be at the Big Apple working and really living. And she never really understood where I got that, thinking from. But truly, I think Singapore has provided all of the foundation for a lot of people to understand the importance of the financial markets, importance of the resources that we have generally is people. We don't even have water. We have to import water from Malaysia. So not being self-sufficient in so many regards really kind of excited me to consider the possibility of what's bigger out there. And like anything, America was really the destination where everybody wanted to be. And so I went to school first in Australia and then ultimately did an exchange year at UCLA, and the rest is history.
Yeah, so that's so interesting. And coming from a different culture and a different place, I grew up in America here, and so very familiar with that, but not getting a perspective that you did, not having everything in your country and having to say, let me go outside. That's quite impressive. So how old were you when you figured that out? You're fairly young, right?
I was 12 years old,
You're 12.
living in my high-rise apartment, looking out the window with all these other buildings around. And I guess, the closest association I had was really New York. And so that's
Yeah.
why the Big Apple came to mind. I
Yes.
wanted something that was familiar, but at the same time on a larger scale. And nothing was better than the scale of New York,
In New
right?
York. Well, you seem to have lived out those dreams because you've had an incredibly successful executive career working for a number of big brands in New York. So that's really, and we're going to get into some of those topics as well. So you knew that you knew you wanted to come to New York. You've also worked in a couple different industries, but a lot in the beauty industry. So maybe tell us a little bit about some of the companies that you have worked for. Any interesting experiences before we get to your leadership experience, and we'll talk specifically about the accountability aspects that we
Sure. Yeah, I mean, my first real job was a fitness manager, believe it or not, in a sort of a hotel fitness club. That quickly evolved, and I joined the Cargill Commodities Trading as a trainee trader. I was with them for close to 7-8 years and moved from trading soft commodities all the way to foreign currency as well as crude oil. And I think what I learned at Cargill was never get too comfortable what you do and where you are, because you're only as successful as the last trade you did, which was essentially that same day or yesterday. So, you don't take yourself too seriously. You knew that results speak for itself. And you knew that while data was important, my boss always used to tell me numbers don't lie, but liars do numbers. So you better know your numbers and know it well. And subsequently from Cargill, I then went on to PepsiCo, which was really doing very similar things, but allowing me to build a P&L center with PepsiCo. And that was really the best learning I had. Was sometimes better lucky than smart. Because of my foreign exchange background, I was working in Thailand at that time with PepsiCo, and the Thai baht at that time was pegged to the US dollar. And for some reason, I was doing counter trade for Indochina as well as other markets in Eastern Europe. And I asked my CFO at that time and said, God, Mark, why do we have so much baht on the books? Why don't we convert some of them to dollars so that we can use it for marketing purposes in the Indochina region? And he said, sure thing, why not? 2 weeks later, the Thai baht got de-pegged from the US dollar. It went from 25 baht to a dollar to 50 baht to a dollar. You can imagine the ruckus it created in a lot of companies. But because we already converted a chunk of our local currency into US dollars, PepsiCo was relatively protected, and Thailand was one of the biggest soft drinks market for us. So it got the attention of then the CEO, Roger Enrico, and he asked Mark, congratulations, how did you figure this out? And I learned my leadership quality at that time. Mark Brown was the CFO at that time. He could have easily taken full credit, but instead he gave me the credit. And my lesson learned at PepsiCo was never take credit, just on your own. Always give credit and you pay it forward. So that was really something I learned, very early on in my career. And then subsequently, I joined the Dow Corporation because I got married and needed to be in the US with the family. And then from Dial, I went on to smaller emerging brands as well as public companies like Elizabeth Arden, taking OLAPLEX public. All of that really gave me a perspective of growth, turnarounds, but at the same time, always leaning in on people to really help the success be accelerated.
You've had an incredible background, all those name brands that we've all heard about. And as you said, sometimes it's better to be lucky to learn that life lesson, that leadership lesson about paying it forward. And timing couldn't have been better than that, giving that 2 weeks and
Yes.
making a difference in PepsiCo. So that's great. I do want to talk a little bit about your leadership experience, and there's one specifically I want to talk to you about, but we'll save that towards the end, the PE experience. My podcast here is about gaining accountability. You want the best out of your team. You want them to do what they're supposed to do. And even when you tell them and you make it abundantly clear, you think they don't just do it.
Right.
So maybe you've had some experiences that are like that you banged your head against the wall, some that might have been successful, maybe something that you learned something from.
Right.
So a
No,
leadership experience.
absolutely. I think, doing a job is never as difficult as managing people. Because when you want somebody to do, follow you rather, the strategy, the tactical plans, and sometimes you think you know better, but really it's all about influencing, inspiring, motivating, and allowing those people to embrace the idea as their own. So I learned early on as well, in trading, because you depend on a slew of traders. You depend on the brokers, you depend on your traders, you depend on the fundamentals as well as the technical analysis. And what was important was never care who gets the credit as long as the job gets done. And ultimately, you got to get everyone aligned, pointing in the same direction. And it doesn't matter whether that direction is being believed by most people, but if they believe it's their idea, they embrace it, you're going to get further than trying to be, the dictator leader where kind of you rule by fear. I believe that you want, authority and it's given, right? If you're the CEO of an organization or the leader of a certain division, the authority is given to you. But what is most important is you have to earn respect and you have to earn credibility. And
Yeah.
that takes time. And so the only way you can really get there is like what I started by saying is you got to inspire, you got to motivate, you got to influence, and ultimately have them embrace the idea as their own.
Yeah, that's great. So have you ever had an experience that it didn't go as planned? Maybe before you've learned all this, you've now had a really successful career, but I imagine there were a couple missteps along the way.
Yes.
So share some of that, the vulnerable times that maybe it didn't work out as you wanted, and maybe that was an important lesson.
Yeah, I mean, I remember very early on at Cargill, we had a tender that was for New Zealand, and it was, US, the US actually consume very high price sugar. The rest of the world actually consume world price sugar. And so there were countries and there still are, where the US will buy sugar from these markets to help give them some sort of assistance. And New Zealand was one of those markets. And I felt very sure that we were going to win that tender because I kind of knew the fundamentals of the business. I knew the technical analysis that was provided to me by my team. And it was my first tender, and I really wanted to do well. And my boss kept telling me, "You sure you don't need any help?" And I said, "No, I think I've got it all, in the bag." Submitted the tender. We did not win that tender. I was devastated and
Oh,
I was so disappointed because I think lesson learned number one is never assume you have all the information. Even when you do, you still have to validate and verify. So that was the first thing. And I very quickly learned what assume means. Assume means that it makes an ass of you and me, and
yeah.
you never want to get there.
Yeah. So how did the discussion go with your boss then, who was offering help and might have actually had enough experience to say, "I'm not sure. You're more confident than maybe you should be," and it didn't work out. So tell me how that conversation went.
He was actually very good. He knew what the outcome was going to be, but he was
Yeah.
willing to let me fail, so to speak, so that I can learn much more from it. He knew the type of personality that I was, that if I succeeded, then, I would never learn. But if I fail, I would take it really to heart. And there was 7 of us that year that was, recruited for the program. And I was one of 2 female candidates. And he has always told me that he felt like, if I applied myself, I could go very far. And because of that faith in me and that belief in me, I took the lesson really well from him, and also learned, it's not about getting upset with someone. It's like at that very moment, make it a teaching moment, and you receive it so much better. And you want to be able to share that moment, whether it's success or failure, in such a way that the person receiving it understand it's for their own benefit.
That's tremendous wisdom that you're sharing there. And it sounds like you have learned how to pay it forward, but probably because you were influenced by a number of great leaders that you were fortunate enough to have, whether it was at Cargill or at PepsiCo or any of the other experiences that you have. And now you've been the CEO for multiple companies too. So, maybe you're leaning on somebody on the board or something like that, but you've had some great leaders to help you realize these things.
Yes, I mean, I have to say, I've been very fortunate. It was, if you look at a lot of my career, I still work in fairly male-dominated sort of leadership position industry, even in beauty. I mean, most of the top CEOs, right, in those big companies are all males, so to speak. So I think the fact that I was able to really be influenced and also be taught on how to really deliver and also, like you say, pay it forward has really helped me in my perspective. Because I always believe that when you are doing anything, whatever your intentions may be, it's always the perception that rules the decision, or rules the impression that people have of you. And so I may sit around thinking that I am very teachable and I'm very coachable. But if the perception that I exude is none of that, nobody is going to help you. So I do, very often sort of take stock of myself and kind of ask myself, do I really know everything, or do I think I know everything? And how do I project myself to people? And I find that the more I acknowledge that I am not fully equipped to be the best in what I do, but I recognize the importance of delivering the best results possible. I think those two comes together very nicely, where people want to help you because you are open to help. And one lesson again I learned in my first CEO role and my first private equity, I remember my lead investor telling me, you are a rock star leader, but you need to become a rock star super coach. And I remember coaching is a lot more important than just leading. Because when you lead, it's yourself. When you coach an army of successful people that will have your back.
That's so it's really amazing the stuff that you have done in your career, but you've learned a lot. And, I can see you have referenced multiple times how you have been influenced or the importance of the people around you. And that certainly has contributed to your success. You're recognizing that. I also recognize, Jue, that you must have a very high EQ, emotional intelligence, because you're constantly taking stock of where you stand, and as you talked about the perception others have, that's the reality, as opposed to what you think is the reality, and your intention might be really completely honorable, but if somebody else doesn't understand that and doesn't perceive it that way, it isn't the truth.
And you're absolutely right. But it took me a while to get here. I mean, when I was in my early 30s, I mean, I always tell people I would really love to turn back the clock, go back in time, and apologize to everybody that I worked with and worked for in my 30s, because I probably was impossible. I probably thought I knew everything. And then you get older and you realize, oh my God, I know nothing. And the imposter syndrome kind of comes into play. And sometimes it reverses too much, right? The pendulum swings too far back and you begin to second guess yourself. So it's very important as you progress in your career to surround yourself not only with mentors that can help you, but also with younger mentors, and because they actually see the world quite differently. And I believe that when you're mentoring someone, your mentee ends up being your mentor, because they are showing you aspects of themselves and aspects of how they think that you may not actually think that way. So I find it very interesting in the world as you interact with people, because you are constantly learning. And like I say, apologizing to people in my 30s would be a wish I could make happen. But as I do more and more podcasts like this, and as I interact with people, I constantly say the same thing. Maybe at some point, some of them will hear me and will
Yeah.
accept my apology.
Well, I think you're not alone, because I think I'm in a similar camp. Back in my 20s or 30s, when I was super confident and hard charging, and you better run faster because you got to try to keep up. That there's things that you'd say, okay, well, if I could have a redo, I would do it differently. But you can't, so you hopefully make some good decisions and make wiser decisions later in life. So
Exactly.
we get older, we lose the value of youth, but hopefully we gain some wisdom in the process.
Like,
So
what Shakespeare says, wisdom is wasted on the young. So
yeah.
sometimes, you got to kind of like have something going for you as you get older, right?
Yes, that's definitely the benefit. So I definitely want to talk to you a little bit about your PE experience. So this podcast is about gaining accountability. Why won't people do what I tell them to do? It's that simple, right? But you have a unique perspective, I think, when we talked briefly before about the need to gain accountability in a fairly short period of time. So PE-backed companies put a leader in and expect results very quickly. And you talked about a golden period or something. You might have a little bit of breathing room, but then at some point the hammer comes down. So maybe tell us about at least one of the experiences you've had with a PE-backed company, and then how that led into how you were to develop the accountability you needed in very short order.
Right. So nameless, obviously, I don't want to incriminate anyone, not
Yes.
definitely not put myself in a difficult position. But I will tell you, most private equity, they are relatively reasonable, because what they want, right, at the end of the day is for their fund to be successful. They
Sure.
also always want the original management team to really try to take it to the finish line. The only time they bring people like me in is that did not happen. And really, it always comes down to year 4, year 5 of a 7-year fund. So you
Yeah.
can imagine there's hardly any time to get anything done, right? So when somebody like me get brought in, I am very sort of aware of the fact that I don't really have a lot of time to build my own team. I really don't have a lot of time to try to get to all the nitty gritty of what is happening. So my best bet is to work with the existing team, unless they don't want to work with me, and then really find out where are some of the low hanging fruits, get that going, because nothing succeeds like success. And then once you are able to get that, you are now able to implement strategic direction that is meaningful for the outcome that you need within a certain period of time, whether it's 24 months. In some cases, I'm given closer to 36 months. But whatever the case may be, I find that when you're working with private equity, you've got to have a very clear strategy and playbook, and communicate that very early on. I made a mistake in my very first CEO role of thinking that that job was ongoing, without understanding that the fact that this was a private equity backed, has a certain timeline, and on top of it, the founder was in the mix, which at some point the founder was going to either get back in, or if it gets sold, then I'm afloat and unsold, right?
Yeah.
I will not have a job. So by recognizing the sensitivity of the timeline, by recognizing the clarity and concise nature of what you need to deliver in terms of a strategy and the tactical plan, and the influencing of the existing team that you have, I will always tell when I go into a new company, I will always tell the existing team that, look, we are not a family. We are a community. You
Hmm.
can't pick and choose your family, and you cannot walk away from your family, but you can walk away from the community. And
Yeah.
if you plan on staying here as part of the community, I need you to give me 100%. And if you don't want to, it's fine. You can leave. No one is going to call you a traitor. So
Yeah.
I find that that fervor that people have when they are any organization always start when they join the company, right? When you join a company, do you start by saying, oh God, I just want to be mediocre. I don't want to be noticed. And if I can just coast for the rest of my life in this company, I'll be happy as pie. No, none of us do that. We all start a
Yes, of course not.
company and we want to become more than what we thought, we could be. And then along the way, it fizzles out because you've got leadership. And usually it's leadership. It's never your coworkers. Leadership starts doing things like, let's run in 100 miles in one direction. No, 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 stop. Let's reverse, course. And then they get perplexed, like, am I being led by idiots here? But obviously, they're not going to tell you you're an idiot. So they
Yeah,
kind of start backing away. And that's where you lose the fervor. And I
yeah,
always tell the team, bring that fervor back because you are now part of this new community and the legacy is going to be yours. Because I will be gone.
yeah,
Once this job is done, you are here, whoever we exit to, but I will be gone. And
yeah,
if you build that legacy with me, that legacy belongs to you. So I
yeah,
find that if somebody talk to me this way, I'll be highly motivated to do the right thing. When I say right thing, align in the right direction. There's no right or wrong in any
yeah.
decision when it comes to a company.
I can tell, Jue, that you are extremely clear in your communication as you're sharing with me, your discussions with some of the teams that you've had. You establishing clarity from the start about them and what they're the fervor you talked about, them being part of the community and the lasting impression that'll be theirs to take. You're very clear, and I think that is certainly one of the hallmark traits of being able to gain accountability within an organization is that clarity from the start. When you're unclear, people aren't sure and they don't put all their effort in, and you don't get as much. You don't get the accountability then.
Yeah.
So that's yeah. So I was going to ask you, you said early on you look for quick wins, right? That's part of the
Yes.
thing. So do you do that more to show the PE company that has hired you, or does it matter more for the team to say we can get some wins? What's your perspective on that?
Yeah.
Because you're trying to influence a lot of people.
Yeah. The most important, I think, is the team because with the PE, I would have already shared that perspective when I was interviewing and when I was like kind of laying out what my thinking, is going to be when I start in my first 90 days. So for the team, it's for them to sort of see the logic, right? The rationale. Why are we moving in this direction? Because it's never quite the same direction that was given when they were, when we had to do this turnaround, or whether
Yeah,
we are in a hyper growth situation. You cannot keep doing the same thing and expect a different outcome. As everybody has said, that
yeah,
defines insanity, right?
yes,
So with that said, it's really to show the team that it can be done and they are doing it. Remember, what's most important is you may have the idea, you may think that, this is the right course of action. But if the team rallies behind the idea, they are executing on it. The sales team has to go talk to the retailers, right? The marketing team has to come with the programs. The shipping and the ops team have to make sure it gets shipped out. And then ultimately, the finance team got to do the analytics with FP&A to show that it really works. When you have all of these moving parts, you can't do it alone. And sometimes, people understand that. That's one thing I do want to bring up about private equity. If you work for a traditional conglomerate in a large company, that leadership style works really well because they have seen people move up the ranks. But
yeah,
when you are in private equity, it's quite important that you get into the nitty gritty as well. As a CEO or even as a group CEO, you may have multiple brands because they have never worked with big companies that allows a lot of delegation of responsibility. And when you try to delegate too much, you are seen as being not as involved as you should be. So I do want to clarify that there are CEOs and then there are CEOs. And it depends on not only the industry you work in, and it also depends on the people you work for. And so understanding that will reduce a lot of friction and frustration. And so, always take feedback and especially constructive feedback well. Because even if, this is my sixth CEO role, it
yeah,
doesn't mean that I get a clean bill of health, perfect 100% scorecard, right? I still get, constructive feedback. And when you get feedback, don't get defensive, look at it as, look, my intention was always good. I never intended, for anyone to think that I am not in the weeds, if let's say that's one of the feedback. But at the end, you have to tell yourself, your intention did not translate into the intention that you wanted to be seen.
Yeah.
Therefore, the perception now is otherwise. So
Yeah.
you got to work on the perception. And if you can't work on the perception because you're constantly being defensive for your own position, then the private equity and you will never meet eye to eye. Because at the end, right, they are the ones who are paying you your compensation. And if you disagree with how they want the outcome to look like, then you don't belong.
Yeah. And it's probably best to figure that out early on. Otherwise, there's going to be hard feelings and lack of success, or
Right,
because you're running
exactly.
towards different goals.
Right. And
So,
how success is defined is different again. So you need to understand what success looks like in their books so that you can deliver what they want. And if very early on you find out that you don't meet, there's no meeting of the minds, then you know that may not be the right opportunity for you.
yeah. Have you run into one of those, or that you've encountered that, and what did you either learn, or I mean, did you know that and make the decision that quickly that, hey, this isn't aligned, or tell me about that experience.
Right. So I have been very fortunate since 2009, my first CEO role. I have never really looked for a job. I mean, the job comes to me because I work for private equity backed companies.
Yeah.
Even with OLAPLEX, it was a private equity back. And then, we went public. Elizabeth Arden, while a public company, had 30% owned by a private equity investor.
Yeah.
So I've always been, sort of aware of that. So what is important is when you're going through that, just understand what is required of you. And when you do that, it helps you kind of navigate and modify the kind of communication, the direction, and the strategy that you need to take to make things smooth.
That's good. I can see all the different experiences, so many ideas that are going on in my head. So I want to bring it back to accountability, and maybe a situation where it didn't work out. They didn't do what you told them to do or what you wanted to do. And I'm sure the way that you operate, the way that you lead, is not do this and just tell them. And you're getting buy-in. You talked about
Right.
that. You're helping them see some quick wins, and how that they are going to be part of the ongoing
Team.
the team that's going to be there, that's going to have a legacy, and they'll be part of that legacy. So there's other things you're doing, as I said, your emotional intelligence wrapped into how you lead, but maybe something that that went off track, that you
Yeah.
didn't get the accountability you're looking for, and why you think that happened.
Yeah, I think, one of the things that I always find is I always tell people I'm a skeptic and I'm a cynic, but it's all on that relative scale. I think to a certain extent, I do give people a lot more credit, and I tend to be very empathetic when I walk into any role when I know that somebody really wanted my job, right? They were already there, they were delivering, they were doing the job, but unfortunately in the transaction, they were not seen as the heir apparent. So
Yeah.
somebody like me gets brought in. So I tend to be very empathetic to that individual or to a group of individuals that see themselves as the potential, leader. And that could still happen, in four
Yeah.
years, in 3 years, when the business exit and they are still around and they have really gained that much more experience, it will be very
Sure.
helpful. But what I have also learned is that human nature is sometimes supersedes the logical. And there will come a time as a leader, as you're going through that pace, and you see and you see that you're giving someone that opportunity and that reciprocity is not being, you're not seeing it.
Not
And in
given.
fact,
Sure.
what you start seeing is the the desire to almost manipulate the situation to sabotage.
Yeah.
Sometimes people self-sabotage, right? To kind of say, instead of me working in the same direction and have a great outcome, instead I rather sabotage the situation so that I can get to the position faster and sooner rather than learning and getting to it. So
Yeah.
without mentioning names, I think I've learned a very good lesson where I think I went overboard in trying to support the individual at the detriment of my own outcome.
Okay.
And it was a hard lesson to learn because it was at a very pivotal part of my career. But I would never let that happen again, right? I
Yeah.
mean, that is something that I know moving forward, I am never going to get to a position where I lose my own sanity because I'm trying to help someone else's.
Yeah. So it sounds like you were trying to help them maybe learn and grow so that they could step into the role that they wanted, but and you bent over too far to try to
Yes.
help them get there. And that's I was going to ask you about that, but I could tell already that you would be a developer of people too by nature, but you can't do it and sacrifice yourself at the same time.
Yeah, I mean,
And
it's a
what
little bit
you're
like being on the airplane where, there's an emergency and the oxygen mask comes out. They always tell you,
put your own
save
on
yourself
first.
first
Yes.
before you go help others because you can't help yourself if you are not, in a position to be helpful.
Yeah, that's a very interesting perspective. Let me just ask you one more thing, and then if you've got anything else to add, some thinking about leadership and accountability. Um, so, um, oh, I just lost my train of thought there. So, well, maybe you have something else to add just about leadership and accountability. Anything else that you're thinking about that you'd want to share with the
Yeah,
with this audience?
I think one thing that is important as a leader is that when you ask somebody to stick their neck out, right, and you're asking especially your sales team, and you kind of say, look, let's push this without mortgaging the future. The last thing I want anyone to do is to stuff a channel in sales. So that
Yeah,
is the worst recipe you can ever do because all you do is you mortgage the future. So let's say you're pushing someone, whether it's your marketing team, whether it's your ops team, let's get this shipment out before December 31st.
yeah,
You can do that if you're a private company because the last day of the shipment still counts. But if you're a public company, it's got to go out by December 15th. So forget about pushing that way. But knowing, your situation. When you ask somebody to do all of that for you, your scientists to really come up with a formulation, a pattern that truly differentiates the brand or the company or the innovation, you've got to provide a safety net for them. You've got to assure them that if this fails, the buck stops with you, that
yeah,
you will have their back. Because a lot of leaders tend to do this. They push and they push and they push, and things don't work. Guess what? The first thing is, oh, this did not happen. Somebody else did it. And at the end of the day, it really doesn't matter who failed you. You
yeah,
failed yourself
yeah,
because you were not there to make sure that things were smooth. So that's why providing a safety net and letting people know that if you should fall, there's a net to catch you. And
yeah,
we are going to be in this together. And I've always, I mean, like, throughout my career, nothing is smooth sailing. I mean, people may look at me and say, oh my gosh, things seem so great. Along the way, there's always pain and there's always, situation that you wish you could do differently. But the one thing I never give up is that I understand how important a team is. And
yeah,
therefore, I always make sure that my team is protected, that they are served well. And even when I do have situation, and most times you do, when you go into a company, you're restructuring and you're
yeah,
reorging.
yeah,
I never let anyone walk away without a personal reference from me, especially my own senior team, the people who
yeah.
report into me, not everybody who's
Yeah,
in the
sure, you're not going to know them
organization.
all well enough.
I
Sure.
will write a reference letter without solicitation, and I will
Yep.
tell them this is in your HR file. This is a copy for you. And a number of times when I do that, I can see the wonderment in their eyes because when they look at me like, why did you do that? And I told them because it's not that you're not a great, employee. You are just not currently in this situation, not the right fit. But it
Yeah.
doesn't mean you're anything less than what you think you are. And I think that's always important to let somebody know when they walk out the door that, they are as good as anyone could be. It's just at this time, it's not the right fit.
Yeah, it's interesting. You are definitely in tune with how you're getting it. It's going to bring me to the final question I do have, which is about trust. I want to ask you about that. But it sounds like that you're finding ways to really connect with your people, which kind of rolls over to this question about trust, because I believe in the model I have in building accountability, it starts at trust. And trust, you mentioned earlier, you've got to work hard to earn their trust. But I always look at it as trust can't be earned. You can do everything you want, but trust is only ever granted to you, right? And so they've got to grant you their trust, or you've got to grant them your trust, whatever it is. But what are your thoughts about building that? Because centrally, you have to have trust to develop the empowerment that they feel, and then taking ownership and becoming accountable. How do you go about, or what are your thoughts on trust and building trust with your teams?
Yeah, I think it's never what you say, it's what you do, right? And how you make people feel about themselves. So I always make it a point when I am asked a question of how am I going to get this done? Why is this program so successful? You're usually in a room full of people. It's not like, okay, you may be talking to even your boss, but it's still two of you. It's never
Yeah.
you talking, on your own. And what is important is when I do that, I tend to be very specific with the team members who has done the job, who has delivered on the performance. And then what I will also do is give very specific examples of what they have done, specifically working and partnering with me. And guess what? Their name surfaces to the top. These people are, they're going to run into them and they're going to say, oh, Jue mentioned you, to me. Oh, so you are that person. I think once it starts circulating that they are not doing the work and not getting the recognition, they begin to realize this is somebody that has my back, and this is somebody that truly, when she or he says something to the effect that, look, trust me because I am going to stand up and stand with you,
But you're
then
actually doing it. You're not
you are
just
actually
saying it.
doing
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
And when you do it, it's not because you're being altruistic. It's because you know
Yeah.
that you can't do it alone. I mean, like anyone who walks into a company and thinks that, day one, day 100, they can just make things happen without the support of your own senior team and the rank and file, I think it's a first time CEO because you actually think you could. I mean, I think when I first started, I thought maybe I could, because I have the PE backing, I've
Yeah.
got the resources. And then you realize, sure, people will just wait for you to fall and all the knives will be behind your back,
Yeah.
right? So no point doing that.
That,
Yeah,
that 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 doesn't make sense. So,
yeah.
well, Dewey, this has been really enlightening and fascinating at the same time. So I really want to thank you for joining me today. It has been a great session here. Hopefully you've enjoyed it as well. And hopefully this is going to be great for the listeners of the podcast, because there's tons of lessons that you've shared in your experiences that can be applied to others' careers as well. So thank you so much, Dewey.
Well, thank you for having me. I really thoroughly enjoyed the conversation.
Yes, that's great.